Hello friends, welcome back to another episode of the podcast, and today we're talking all things how to prepare yourself for winter, because although you can't necessarily avoid the sniffles, there is a lot that you can do to bolster your immune system, reduce the likelihood you catch something, and also strengthen your immune system. So if you do catch a cold, you can actually recover more effectively. And this is by no means an exhaustive list, is it? Because we'd be here all day. But we wanted to just share with you a handful of things that we recommend that now that we're actually entering into the cooler months of the year, that you can add to your toolkit and make sure you support yourself as well as possible. And this is something I'm really passionate about, Nat.
One of the many things.
Because it just, whilst having a human body means you're inevitably going to get bugs from time to time, that's just part of being alive. But at the same time, I've been through this actually when I was working in corporate and not getting enough sunlight, but also stress, late nights, caffeine, etc., where I did get a few colds a year, even though I was taking some of the things that we're going to recommend today. And so it's a well-rounded approach that we recommend. And in doing so, I don't want to say I haven't had a cold, but I think I've had the flu and COVID. I've had the flu once and I think COVID once.
Yeah, I think you've only had COVID once.
Yeah.
Same.
And that's in the last 10 years. So I think that's pretty good innings.
Well played. Well
Yes.
played.
So I might let you start with what you recommend.
Well, I think for me, the first thing I always think about, and more so recently because the context to what I'm about to say is, I don't think I've shared this on the podcast yet, but I've actually been starting to do some further study in more of TCM style, so traditional Chinese and Japanese medicine style of practicing, and I'm very much at the beginning of that journey. When I first think of winter and preparing for winter from that perspective, something that I've been thinking about more recently because I've been doing some further study in more of, I guess, traditional Japanese and Chinese style medicine, is really just approaching how we live more in seasons. So I think that in the culture that we live in, there isn't really a time and a space for intentional rest unless you really create it. And I do think that we are meant to live seasonally, not just eat seasonally, which we talk about all the time on the podcast, but also live seasonally. And one thing that I think is really important is using those cooler months, autumn, winter. I mean, it's not that cold on the Gold Coast, but relatively speaking, to actually use it as a time where you do practice more rest and practice more slowing down and self-care. And of course, that's somewhat of a privileged thing to say, and not everyone is going to have the same capacity or life circumstances in order to invite that in exactly an identical way to what I'm saying. But relative to what maybe how you usually function and operate, I would say one thing that's important is just going, okay, is maybe through winter, it's a time where I say yes to less things socially, or where I, pull back on some of the more yang and like exerting things that I do in the name of actually having a time like all creatures do of almost like hibernation to prepare then for those warmer months. So that's something that I do really think about. And I guess if we bring it back to more of a pragmatic thing of through winter and preparing for winter and preparing your immune system, the other thing I would say is, as we know, the more taxed your nervous system is, the more you're going to be susceptible to getting bugs and colds and flus and viruses, and also the longer it's going to take you to recover from those things. So if it's not that you're taking it to that step of zooming out and inviting in some actual seasonal living, maybe it's just honouring and acknowledging the fact that if you are constantly at the edge of your capacity or on the edge of burnout in winter at a time when there are more bugs around, there are more people that are potentially carrying those and sick, you're more likely to catch them. You're also more likely to struggle from recovering from whatever you've caught. And I don't think it's definitely not wrong to sometimes get a cold or to get sick. It's more about the frequency and also how quickly you can bounce back. And often the that seasons of change through the TCM lens that I'm learning is often the time where you're more vulnerable. But I think if we can lean into honouring living a little bit more seasonally, I think we could reduce some of that.
Yes, I think there's so many layers to that, and everything has a season, right? We're not evergreen trees, we're deciduous trees. Meaning we do have this period of, more rest, more darkness. And I think a lot of people have really learned so much recently about circadian rhythms, the 24-hour rhythm.
You wouldn't have anything to do with that, would you?
Well, and they have contributed a little
Hates
bit.
talking about light.
Yeah, it's a disgusting topic, no. And of course the lunar cycle. And I think many women can probably relate to optimizing their monthly schedule, obviously within certain constraints. It's perhaps more flexible when you work for yourself versus, say, a corporate job, but scheduling social activities and other things like that according to the parts of your cycle where you're going to have more energy, and maybe not overcommitting where your energy might naturally be a bit lower. And in this context, it's a circadian rhythm, and it is, it's a capitalist society that expects us to be productive 24/7 every day of the week, the year, that, regardless of our actual biological requirements. And I will touch on circadian biology because, of course, I will later on in our chat. But there is a compensatory mechanism that, if allowed to do what it's meant to do, is that we're meant to sleep more in winter because there's longer hours of darkness, and the extra melatonin compensates for the falling levels of vitamin D. Now, we will talk about vitamin D and how to use that as a tool, in your winter toolkit, but resting in those cooler months of the year is biologically appropriate, like taking a bit off your plate, and maybe the only wiggle room you have is social activities and personal projects. But it's just worth being mindful that if you are going to keep pushing yourself during that time, it's going to tax your system, including your immune system, for sure, and make you more vulnerable. And I think what you said is really important to acknowledge. It's like getting a cold isn't a crime. It's actually also, naturopathically speaking, minor infections like that are considered healthful. And it's probably, we don't have enough time to explain that, but essentially with fevers and autophagy and the way the immune system cleans out debris when it's activated from a pathogen, can actually have a net positive effect. But if you're getting cold after cold or taking a long time to recover, that's definitely a red flag. So I think that's important, because no supplement, no medication, no biohack is going to overcome a lack of rest or seasonally inappropriate yang activities. So
I know, we see it all the time, don't we? It's boring to say the foundations make the difference, but honestly, they do. I was having a conversation with 2 clients this week who had recently gone on a holiday for, I think it was quite a long period of time, like 4 weeks or so. And I said to both of them before they left separately, it's going to be really interesting to see how many of your digestive and energy and other symptoms actually settle without you changing very much. And naturally, a question that comes back to me a lot when clients are about to go on holidays is how should I manage the food thing? I don't know if I'm going to be able to eat as well, or if they're gluten-free, not celiac, but just gluten intolerant, they might ask, what do I do? And my answer is often quite similar, in that I just say, do the best you can and really be in whatever you're doing, and know that there's healing just by being on holiday or resting, but only if you go into it with that attitude. And so many people notice, and those of you listening might have noticed the same thing, that how many of your symptoms, you know, clear up when you're on a holiday, how much your inflammation goes down, how much you're like, oh, wow, I didn't realize I could eat this food without feeling, you know, extremely bloated. And it just goes to show how much having those foundations, particularly of rest, I think that's one of the ones that we are collectively not the greatest at. And it's the one that I think we, even though we seem to speak about it so much, it's constantly underestimated and underdone. And I'd include myself in this. I'm not a great rester. I think I've gotten a lot better over the years, but you know, you guys might have picked up already over the years of listening to the podcast that I like to do stuff. I'm a busy, and I don't mean busy as in doing things I don't want to do. I mean, I love activity. I love movement. I love that. And I've also learnt the hard way sometimes, and not the hard way other times, that rest is productive.
Oh, yes. And it doesn't have to be productive, but if you're an Enneagram 3 like me, that can be the thing you need to tell yourself to slow down. I'm going to get it tattooed somewhere for me. I'm still working on that for sure. But I think, that's such an important reminder that that's one of those environmental things that we have to take care of before we turn our attention to supplements and tools. But speaking of tools, I think it's always a good idea at the beginning of winter, or rather in autumn, to actually prep a few things at home. In Chinese medicine, you might have covered this already, but the immune system drops at night. And this isn't always the case with the pattern, but I'm sure you've noticed personally, I have. We often get sick in the evening when the yang is shifting. And then if you do get sick in the evening and then you're waiting 12 hours till you can get to the health shop or the pharmacy the next day, it's kind of set in the next day. So if you have something on hand ready to take at the first sign of anything, you can really support yourself to move through it more quickly. And there's a couple of things that I love to have. Now, my favorite is the germ juice. Have I ever made this for you?
No, and you should. It's autumn right now as we're recording it.
Right.
So
okay.
Amy's going to deliver some.
I will make you a batch. So germ juice, I will put the link in the show notes so you have the recipe. It's on my blog though. If you're listening to this, you can just search germ juice. I actually have 2 recipes. I've got the original recipe, the traditional one that I was taught in naturopathic college, and there's 1,000 iterations of the same thing, by the way. You can just kind of do something similar and it'll still be good. I then have a turbo boosted version, which is like rocket fuel, adults only stuff. I'll put links to both, but I'm talking just more about the classic germ juice here.
Yeah.
It's essentially, you simmer ginger, garlic, cayenne pepper, lemon, apple cider vinegar, and I think that's everything in the basic bitch version. I like the rocket fuel version.
So what makes the rocket fuel version?
Couple of things, but the main thing in it is the thyme oil, essential oil. Thymol is the main volatile oil component of thyme, and when we ingest it, it's excreted via our lungs, and so we can disinfect our lungs through exhalation by ingesting thyme.
You look so impressed right now.
Nature just never fails to thrill me sometimes. But it's really potent, so I would not give that one to kids. But if you're really looking to up the ante, it's available to you. But what I like to do is one batch makes 2 cups, and you can freeze it, I suppose, in jars, but I like to freeze it in ice cube trays. 2 reasons. If you're giving it to kids, you can use a much smaller dose, just a couple of ice cubes with some, hot-ish water and a bit of manuka honey. Beautiful. But for grown-ups who don't mind putting some hair on their chest, drink it straight. That's what my granddad would say. I don't put hairs on your chest.
I get it, because they stand up.
Something like that. I'm not quite sure, but I'm assuming so.
How haven't you inquired further?
Right, I'll call
I
granddad.
reckon it's because they stand up, surely. Because when you're nervous or activated and the hairs on your body stand up.
Makes sense.
I think your grandpa was onto something.
He was definitely onto something.
Well, we could be completely wrong, in which case we'll learn later when we Google
it. I'll report back. But having it there means that the first sign of like, oh, my throat's a bit sore, I feel a bit blocked in my sinuses, or I'm a bit sniffly, you can just defrost it, heat it up, drink it, and you're already supporting yourself medicinally. And I do love that. The other option though, which is a lot more pleasant, and especially if you've got fussy kids, by the way, you can do both, but is make yourself some elderberry syrup. Now you can buy it from pharmacies, health shops. Sambucol, I think, is probably the most famous one. Any parent who's into natural health probably have used it, maybe have it on their shelf. That's a good fallback if you haven't made any. Keeping some in the cupboard, definitely a good idea. It's actually really fun to make.
Agree.
It's a nice activity to do with kids. It's a nice activity to do as a big kid yourself, but if you have children, this is a really nice way to get them involved in making their own herbal medicine. And then you can just keep it in the fridge, and then even it's not even something I'd say you need to do preventatively, but you could a little bit each day. And I think, either one of those or both are really powerful, but also gentle herbal medicines.
Yeah, and great for the whole family as well, I think. I often, get clients where, they're in a family, they've got young children are going to daycare or going to school and just naturally interacting with more germs. It is such a good and low cost, effective tool to have in your home. And there is a time and a place for stronger things. And also, I think it's really especially important right now when a lot of people are feeling the financial pressure, that we also have access to, healing medicines that come from the garden that you can make. And also, isn't it a beautiful thing to be able to teach children as well, or even other people that you're around, just pass on that knowledge of making something simple with your own hands from nature that can help support you. I think a lot of that has been lost in place for even, buying a supplement off a shelf, which again, we're fans of. And also, I guess it's the desire in me to keep true naturopathic medicine alive in a way, and to make it more accessible to people who maybe can't afford that, or who are just really interested in it.
Yeah, it's wonderful traditional knowledge. But having said that, that's, I guess, a therapeutic thing you can use if you're sick. But there's another way people can bring herbal medicine into their home cheaply as like a daily care too, right?
Just herbal teas, and I guess the ones that come to mind for me that I would have, maybe not all of them, but some of them, is things like ginger, really great one, and popular and works on lots of different things. Echinacea, astragalus, rosehip. There's so many that have immune supportive properties. And what I often tell people to do is, if you have a tea that you particularly like, let's say it's peppermint, for example, you could always do a 50-50 blend, so that if you don't love the taste of echinacea, for example, you've still got whatever tea you do like in that mix to help. And I quite like encouraging people to move towards buying and mixing their own herbal teas where they can. I actually think it ends up being a bit more cost effective, and you can also, it's not hard. It sounds hard at first, but you go on to an organic herbal tea dispensary and you just buy a small amount of the different herbs that you want, and then you can put them in jars, or you can do a bit of a mix of a few where you might want to make your own DIY immune supportive blend like I've just mentioned, and you can have that. Or you might want to make your own digestive blend with some chamomile and fennel and licorice and peppermint and ginger, and you can have that. And of course you can buy these things, but again, if I'm mindful that a lot of people who listen to this podcast are really interested and are living in a way that really values health, and they might want to do a little bit more DIY. And I guess this is a really relatively safe way to do it. Like, I wouldn't be telling people to go out there and grab lots of herbal tinctures and DIY if you don't really know what you're doing just yet. But herbal teas, they still are potent when they're used appropriately and in a strong enough infusion, so to speak. But I also think, it's pretty safe.
Yeah, it is really safe, really gentle, inoffensive. And I think just adding anything you want to peppermint tea is such a life hack.
Yes.
I definitely do that. Like I've got a tea library,
Yeah.
which you have seen.
I love your tea library.
I might even put a photo up on our YouTube video if anyone's curious to see it. But that's exactly what I would do every morning, will do most days, is every morning I make a pot and I'll put a couple of teaspoons of peppermint in there as the base, and then I'll just cherry pick what I need for the day. But when it comes to immunity, a traditional naturopathic blend for cold and flu is a yep tea, which is yarrow, echinacea and peppermint. Really lovely for kids. Yarrow specifically helps support fever. So you've got echinacea stimulating the white blood cells, peppermint clearing the airways, and really good for kids especially, but also us. But yeah, astragalus, I love that, especially as a preventative or recovery. And it's a nice way to support yourself. You're going to have to drink anyway during the day. You may as well hydrate with something medicinal.
Yeah, and you can add in some manuka honey or just some raw honey that also has those immune supportive properties to them. Of course, don't go absolutely nuts or you'll end up just creating another problem with too much sugar.
Yes.
But there is definitely benefit to that, and a great way to get kids into to soften the strength sometimes of the taste of the herbs with a little bit of sweetness can be helpful.
Especially if you're getting one with active like UMF or MGO, so it has antimicrobial properties. Also really great for sore throats and things like that too. Side note, I treated my dog's kennel cough with manuka honey and cherry bark.
Yes.
Which was a win for herbal medicine.
Yeah, it feels so good when you treat your pets with natural medicine and you're like, yes, I feel so successful.
Good.
I don't know why I think for me it feels extra successful because it's not like I'm trained in veterinary herbal medicine. I'm just extracting what I know of human naturopathic medicine at weight appropriate doses and making sure I'm not going to kill my dog by just doing my due diligence. And I wouldn't be someone who's confident in treating other people's animals because I'm just not. It's outside my scope, except for my friends and my family who are willing to go a bit rogue. But I love the success I feel when I'm like, nailed it.
So nice. I mean, it's not a direct correlation, but there are definitely things that are very low risk. And in my case, I only did that because she developed it at like 10 p.m. at night and we're an hour from an emergency vet and she couldn't breathe. So I'm like, what do I do? And then it was so successful. I stayed up syringing it into her mouth sort of every 30 to 45 minutes. And then by the morning she was coming out the other side. So
resilient, aren't they? Just like kids, just
amazing.
Without the extra layers of being an adult, just things turn around.
Best.
Anyway, what else? So obviously that's a lot of basic, medicine cabinet, as in like food as medicine cabinet kind of vibes. And also it wouldn't be us if we didn't mention nutrients and some of the nutrients that perhaps we'd suggest having on hand when you are moving into the winter season.
Totally. So everything in our body, all of the enzymes run on various nutrients. So our bodily functions don't function without these things. And when it comes to immune system optimization, there are a few key ones. So look, extra vitamin C, always a good idea. Like it's a water-soluble nutrient, which means we need to be getting it every day. It's interesting that there's some literature that we actually used to have a gene to make vitamin C. We're only one of 3 species that don't make our own anymore. But we used to have an enzyme, glucuronate lactone oxidase, could be a bit
Just
off.
say A's and we'll know.
It's an enzyme that used to make vitamin C from glucose, actually, from sugar. And basically our white blood cells secrete vitamin C like a little magic force field coat so that as they shoot chemicals out to kill off pathogens that don't also die. So it makes sense that when your immune system activity is upregulated, you're going to need more vitamin C. And it's really curious that scientists hypothesized we used to make 10 to 15,000 milligrams a day, but the RDA is 130 milligrams. That's a big gap. I personally like to take 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day just as a standard thing. And then if I'm coming down with something or I've been exposed, I'll ramp that right up. But basically, it's protective for our white blood cells. Zinc and vitamin A, also really important. The lining of our nose, throat, lungs, and all mucous membranes are protected and repaired with those two nutrients. So a deficiency in either of those makes it you're more likely to get sick. But zinc's also the fuel for our white blood cells. You can see this pretty little zinc crystal in the white blood cell if you look at under a microscope. And if they are zinc replete, they start to move around. But if they're zinc deficient, they sit there like a little blob. They can't do their job. You know, you can't drive your car without petrol. Our white blood cells can't cruise around for bugs without zinc. And those two things are also needed for antibodies. So if you want to develop immunity to something, whether you're naturally acquiring an infection or you're imitating it in some way, you need those nutrients. Vitamin D, I mean, hello, I probably should have mentioned that one first, but vitamin D, our body actually makes its own antiviral drug, if we want to call it that, or compound called cathelicidin, which is active against the flu virus and cold viruses. So if we're vitamin D replete, and I'll explain what that is, what's considered to be replete in a minute, we are just so equipped to neutralize a threat or address a threat at the city gates, if you like. But with vitamin D, for lots of reasons, people have suboptimal levels. And when we think about vitamin D levels, we don't really pay attention to the deficiency levels on the blood tests. They are
so low.
So if your levels drop below 70 nanomoles per litre, your risk of catching a cold or flu is doubled. If they drop below 50, which is when you get classified as deficient, the risk is tripled. So I personally don't like to see anyone's levels go below 80, but it is a seasonally acquired nutrient, which means you also have to assess your level based on the time of year you've tested it. So for those of us in the Southern Hemisphere, we're going into autumn, also called fall for our Northern Hemisphere friends. And at this time, our levels need to be over 100, ideally closer to 120 to have enough on board to get through winter. And as I said, enough sleep, more hours of darkness, melatonin will compensate for falling vitamin D levels. But I am concerned anytime I see levels below 80. And further to that, if you're 80 at this time of year, at the end of summer, you're in trouble. You need to be taking vitamin D to get you through winter sufficiently. So definitely, I'm about to test mine actually. So maybe when this episode comes out, I'll also share my results and what I'm going to do.
I feel like I tested mine not that long ago. It was good.
Was it?
I don't take vitamin D, but I'm in the
You're
sun
out in
a
the
lot.
sun. Yeah.
Can't remember what level it was, but
you were
it was
happy
like
with
in the
it.
hundreds.
Excellent.
Yeah. I was
gold star for you.
Golden star.
Yeah, so good.
But yeah, it is a good thing to get checked. I think every 6 months, kind of end of summer or actually to be fair, I don't have an exact time that I always test it for clients. Literally, as I'm having this thought, I'm like, that's not true. I don't always test it at the exact time because it
just
depends.
Test it whenever they come to see you.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course.
But if I was thinking from purely a health preventative perspective, I think I would probably test it kind of at the end of summer, knowing just where I'm sitting so that you've got enough time to correct levels.
Yeah.
And then I think I'd probably make a decision based on what the level was, how soon I'd test it again. But I feel like every 6 to 12 months is a reasonable time frame. I definitely don't think you need to be checking it every couple of months because once you've got a ballpark figure and you're doing an intervention, it's provided you're not doing stupid interventions. I think that it's enough time.
It takes care of itself.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And probably the last thing I'll mention is we do sometimes lean on Saccharomyces boulardii. And this is sort of something that I wouldn't necessarily say go and do yourself, but we do secrete an immunoglobulin called secretory IgA across our mucous membranes that acts like a bouncer at a nightclub door to prevent viruses from adhering to the mucosa or attaching and actually making us sick. And if your levels are good, that's another form of innate defense that you can optimize. And signs you have low secretory IgA, there's many, but like food intolerances, thrush, you literally can't get thrush if you have good secretory IgA. Mucosal infections, like if you're prone to gastro or sinus infections or conjunctivitis or UTIs, like they're all kind of red flags to me that I'd look at rebuilding someone's immune system like that. And then maybe just swinging back to vitamin C for 1 minute. Our white blood cells don't realize they can no longer convert glucose into vitamin C, which means if you're consuming sugar, you actually disable your immune system by up to 8 hours, for up to 8 hours by up to 75%. Essentially, the white blood cells can't protect themselves with sugar. They need it to be vitamin C. So, I mean, I would say I'm the queen of the anti-sugar club anyway, but if something's going around, or let's say you're traveling and you want to catch something, just cut it right out, because otherwise you're going to be running around with an immune system that's defenses are down.
And the only other thing that I wanted to add to that, as you were saying, vitamin C as a member of the iron overload club, is just generally vitamin C, amazing for the small percentage of people who know they have hemochromatosis, which is a genetic condition where you tend to accumulate iron, or you already have really high iron stores or high iron saturation. It's something that you probably want to be not supplementing with or finding an alternative, or if you are using really low doses of it, just because it helps to
increase iron absorption.
Yeah.
Although if you have an iron-free meal, that's a bit of a loophole.
Yes.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
So just be like
mindful.
Yeah, mindful if that's you. Most people that's not going to apply to, but I'm just aware of it because I am that person who tends to hold on to all of the iron. So love that. I mean, there's benefits and there's drawbacks, but anyway, story for another day. The next thing I wanted to bring up is something that I love to talk about, which is eating seasonally. So again, I think this is a little bit lost in our culture. It's not very much embedded into how we eat. It's even less embedded into how you eat if you're buying from a supermarket or you're in a big city. And all of that's fine. You can still make changes and decisions around this once you're aware of it. But just that there is a wisdom and a benefit to what is available to us seasonally. And if you can focus at least partly on consuming more of that seasonal produce, I think it's a really smart inbuilt system from nature. And so some examples of winter fruits, and this is not an exhaustive list, by the way, I'm just naming a few, is things like apple, pear, dragon fruit, pawpaw, avocado. And then in terms of veggies, some examples would be things like asparagus, beetroots, carrots, zucchini, potato, cauliflower. And again, you don't have to overhaul everything. It's just something to be mindful of. And the other thing that I would also say, and I feel like I've said this a million times in clinic this week, is really trying to focus on cooked, like slow cooked, warming foods. So yeah, slow cooker, casseroles, soups, stews, etc. And I think this is beneficial in this season, yes, full stop. I also feel like there needs to be a PSA out there somewhere for a lot of people who have low energy or poor digestion or sluggish digestion around just the benefit of swapping out some of that cold, raw food for stuff that is like hydrating, like wet, and you know, and warm and cooked, and therefore easier to digest. And if you know that that's you, and some people listening will be like, oh yeah, I've been told that before by my naturopath or by my acupuncturist, or I just know that to be true in terms of how I feel, I think these cooler months are a really good time to start to practice that habit and start making some more dishes that are that way natured, so that when you need to do that in the future for any reason, even if it's in a different season, then you have something to draw upon. Whereas I think, as much as I am a fan of smoothies as a strategy for people who are busy at times, if you don't have to lean on that in winter, don't lean on something else that's warm.
That's such good advice. And the only thing I'll add to that is just look up what's seasonal for your area. Australia is such a big country. Like, what's seasonal in Tasmania is different for us on the Gold Coast. Like, tropical fruits, we would generally say, don't eat tropical fruits in winter. But if you're living
With that exact voice.
Yeah, with that exact voice. Yeah, don't eat tropical fruit in winter. But if it's growing in your local area, like at that time, that's okay, because that's the season you're currently living in. But that's very different to Tasmania, isn't it? Or say Melbourne or Perth. So there are some great online resources. You can just literally Google like what's in season plus Sydney and sort of see. And, you know, if you are lucky enough to have a farmer's market available, everything there's only going to be what's grown locally and seasonally. So yeah, that makes things a bit easier. But as you said, supermarkets make it really tricky because they import things, they freeze things, they chemically ripen things. And so I think a lot of people don't even realise that you shouldn't have strawberries all year round or mangoes all year round. It's just, I consider we're very lucky to have that, but also eating that way doesn't help us align with our biology that well.
Agreed.
And speaking of which, just harping back on the circadian thing to close out.
You've got 60 seconds.
Okay, thank you. All right, so just reiterating, you need to sleep more or indulge in darkness more, which means getting rid of blue light. It wouldn't be an episode without me talking about that.
It wouldn't be.
But also shrink your eating window. So this isn't about eating less, but from a genetic expression point of view, our genes do different things in the dark than they do in the light. So, and it can get tricky in the middle of winter because the daylight hours can be as low as 8, 9, 10 hours. But just shrinking your eating window down to 12 hours max, if that's the best you can do. Breakfast after 6 a.m, finish dinner by 6 p.m. or 6:30 to 6:30. Or if you can have the flexibility to just eat during daylight hours, have an earlier dinner so you know, your body can go into its sleep processes and our winter clearing out, if you like, a little bit more quickly and easily.
Yeah, and with the caveat of, obviously, if you're currently navigating a unique health situation, we would, you know, maybe change that. I'm just saying that because I know some people
will take it as gospel.
Take it as like, okay, everyone must be doing this, but you know,
might not be appropriate for you.
So if you're generally well and healthy and just looking for optimizing things, do it. If you're currently going through a particular illness or health challenge, maybe check in with someone on an individual basis to see, you know, within that broad range or that scope, what might be appropriate for you right now.
Yes.
And on that note, we hope that you're going to go and make some delightful winter supportive concoctions. Please, if you do, tag us on Instagram, send us a photo. I love to see what people make, and we'll be back with you again next week.
See you then, friends. Bye.